Every time you think the world has found its footing, something shifts beneath the surface, quietly, methodically, without a headline loud enough to shake you awake. And right now, that shift is happening in the Pacific, not with a bang, not with a declaration, but with drills, with warships, with fighter jets cutting through the skies above the Taiwan Strait in numbers that would have been unthinkable just 5 years ago. Here is what U.S. intelligence is telling us, and pay close attention because this is not the kind of story that stays over there. China has not set a date to move on Taiwan. That is what the intelligence community believes as of right now. But, and this is the part that should stop you cold, the absence of a date does not mean the absence of a plan. It does not mean the absence of preparation, and it absolutely does not mean the absence of intention. What it means is that China is building the capability to move whenever the moment is right. And that moment, according to everything we are watching unfold in real time, is getting closer. Let's take a step back, because to understand where we are today, you have to understand how we got here and why this particular intelligence assessment matters so much more than its headline might suggest to the casual reader. For decades, the question of Taiwan has been one of the most carefully managed tensions in all of global geopolitics. The United States operates under what is called strategic ambiguity, meaning Washington has never made an explicit, ironclad, written-in-stone promise to militarily defend Taiwan if China attacks. The idea behind strategic ambiguity was always that it would keep everyone cautious. It would keep China guessing, keep Taiwan from doing anything too provocative on the independence front, and keep the United States from being locked into a commitment that could drag the country into a war with a nuclear-armed superpower over a small island. That was the theory. That was the carefully constructed diplomatic architecture that held for decades. But here is the thing about carefully constructed diplomatic architecture, that it was built for a different China than the one we are dealing with right now. The China of today is not the China of the 1990s or even the early 2000s. Under Xi Jinping, who has consolidated more personal power than any Chinese leader since Mao Zedong, the posture toward Taiwan has fundamentally changed. Xi has publicly and repeatedly stated that reunification, his word, his framing, is not optional. It is not a matter of if. According to everything Xi Jinping has said publicly, in speeches, in party documents, in conversations with foreign leaders, it is a matter of when. And the People's Liberation Army has been given explicit instructions to be ready by 2027, according to one assessment. Ready by 2035, according to another. But the intelligence community's most current read is that there is no fixed date on the calendar, and that ambiguity itself is part of the strategy. Think about what that means for a moment. When a military force is training not for a specific date, but for a specific capability, that is actually more dangerous, not less. A fixed date gives you a countdown. It gives you a window for diplomacy, for deterrence, for last-minute negotiations to kick in. No fixed date means the decision could be made in response to a political development, a miscalculation, a provocation, or simply a moment when Xi Jinping looks at the geopolitical landscape and decides the conditions are favorable. That is a much harder threat to deter. That is a much harder threat to prepare for. And that is exactly the kind of threat that American intelligence analysts are losing sleep over right now. Now let's talk about what China has actually been doing. Because the drills that are referenced in this intelligence assessment are not your routine military exercises. What China has been conducting around Taiwan, particularly since the dramatic escalation that followed then-Speaker Nancy Pelosi's visit to the island back in August of 2022, are full-scale rehearsals. That is the word military analysts use. Rehearsals. China has been practicing blockades, simulating missile strikes, coordinating naval and air force operations in patterns that mirror exactly what a real military operation against Taiwan would look like. They are not hiding it. They are doing it out in the open, which itself is a message. It is a message to Taiwan, to the United States, to Japan, to Australia, to every country in the Indo-Pacific that has a stake in what happens in that strait. The message is, we can do this, we are practicing this, and we are getting better at it every single time. The frequency and scale of these exercises has been increasing year over year. After the Pelosi visit, China launched what it called exercises that surrounded Taiwan on multiple sides simultaneously, a capability demonstration that the Pentagon took extremely seriously. And the exercises have not stopped. They have evolved. the People's Liberation Army Eastern Theater Command, which is the command responsible for a Taiwan operation, has been integrating its forces, running joint operations between naval vessels, air assets, rocket forces, and cyber units in ways that reflect genuine operational learning. They are not just flying planes in circles. They are stress testing logistics, testing command and control systems, and identifying weaknesses in their own operational plans so they can fix them before the real thing. And here is where the intelligence picture becomes genuinely alarming, because U.S. intelligence is not just watching troop movements and counting warships. They are watching the internal decision-making dynamics inside the Chinese Communist Party. They are watching how Xi Jinping talks about Taiwan in closed-door settings. They are watching the signals that come through economic planning, through defense procurement, through the kinds of quiet preparations that a government makes when it is genuinely moving towards something rather than just posturing for domestic consumption. And what they are seeing is not a leadership that is bluffing. What they are seeing is a leadership that has made a strategic decision and is methodically building toward executing it. Now, does that mean war is inevitable? No. And this is important to say clearly because the goal here is not to terrify people, it is to inform them. War is not inevitable. Deterrence has worked for decades in this part of the world, and the United States and its allies still have significant tools available to make a Taiwan military operation extremely costly for Beijing. The U.S. Pacific Fleet is the most powerful naval force in the world. The U.S. alliance structure in the Indo-Pacific, Japan, South Korea, Australia, the Philippines, represents a formidable combined deterrent. Taiwan itself has been significantly upgrading its own defense capabilities with U.S. assistance, moving toward an asymmetric defense strategy that would make any Chinese invasion brutal, prolonged, and expensive. And China's own military planners know all of this. They are not ignorant of the costs. The question is whether, at some point, Xi Jinping decides those costs are worth bearing. That calculation is shaped by a whole constellation of factors that are in constant motion. Taiwan's domestic politics matter, particularly how strongly the Taiwanese public and government assert a separate identity from the mainland, which they have been doing with increasing confidence. American domestic politics matter enormously. China watches Washington with extraordinary attention, and what they see right now is a United States that is internally divided, politically turbulent, and in the middle of serious debates about its role and commitments in the world. The state of the U.S.-China economic relationship matters. The health of China's own economy matters. And it is worth noting that China has been facing significant economic headwinds domestically, which historically can cut both ways in terms of whether a government turns toward or away from military adventurism. What is particularly striking about this intelligence picture is the way it intersects with everything else happening in the world right now. Because we are not living in a stable, predictable geopolitical moment. We are living in a moment of profound global restructuring. Russia's invasion of Ukraine fundamentally changed the calculus about how major powers use military force and what the international community can and cannot do about it. That war has been a tutorial for every military planner on the planet, including in Beijing and including in Taipei. Chinese military analysts have been watching the Ukraine war with intense focus, studying the role of drones, the importance of logistics, the impact of international sanctions, the question of how long a determined smaller nation can resist a larger military power with outside support. Every lesson from Ukraine is being processed and incorporated into Chinese military planning for Taiwan. And what is the lesson that Beijing may be drawing? Some analysts believe China watched Russia struggle in Ukraine and concluded they need to be even more prepared, even more decisive, even more overwhelming in the initial phase of any Taiwan operation so that they do not get bogged down in the same way Russia did. They do not want a prolonged war. They want a rapid, decisive fait accompli, a situation where they move so fast and so overwhelmingly that the international community and the United States are confronted with a reality that is already done before a response can be mounted. That is the military concept they are building toward. Speed, surprise, overwhelm. That means the intelligence community's assessment that there is no set date is actually pointing to something very specific. China wants the capability to execute that rapid, overwhelming operation on short notice, to be able to go from a decision to launch to an actual operation in a compressed time frame that does not give the United States and its allies time to pre-position forces, reinforce Taiwan, or coordinate a response. That is what all the training is about. That is what all the rehearsals are building toward. The absence of a set date is not a sign that China is uncertain about its intentions. It is a sign that China is building optionality, the ability to move when conditions are most favorable, with minimum warning. Now think about what this means for American policy, because this is ultimately where the stakes land for the people watching this right now. The United States spends more on defense than the next 10 countries combined. It has treaty alliances across the Indo-Pacific. It has made political statements at the highest levels, including from President Biden himself on multiple occasions before he left office, suggesting the U.S. would defend Taiwan militarily. And yet the actual official policy has not changed. It is still strategic ambiguity. That gap between the signals being sent and the official doctrine is something China is analyzing very carefully, and so is every other country in the region trying to figure out what America actually stands for and what commitments it will actually honor. There are serious, credible voices in the foreign policy community, not hawks, not warmongers, serious strategic thinkers who believe the United States needs to move away from strategic ambiguity and toward strategic clarity. The argument is that clarity deters, that if Beijing knows with certainty that an attack on Taiwan triggers a direct military response from the United States, the calculus changes fundamentally. The counterargument has always been that clarity is provocative, that it removes diplomatic flexibility, that it could push China into acting sooner rather than later before U.S. capabilities are fully in place, and that it ties American hands in ways that could prove catastrophically costly. Both of those arguments are live right now, inside think tanks, inside the Pentagon, inside the State Department. What the intelligence community's current assessment does is add urgency to that debate. Because the window for strategic decisions, for choices about deterrence architecture, alliance management, defense investment, and diplomatic engagement is not unlimited. Military capabilities take years and decades to build. Alliance relationships take years to cultivate and can fray quickly if they are not tended to. The decisions that get made or not made in the next few years about how the United States postures itself in the Indo-Pacific will shape whether deterrence holds or fails. And this is the part that connects most directly to the lives of ordinary Americans, because there is a tendency to think of this as a faraway issue, a problem for diplomats and generals, something that happens in a different hemisphere and does not touch daily life in the United States. That is exactly the wrong way to think about it. Taiwan is not just an island of 23 million people that the United States has a moral and historical relationship with, though it is absolutely that. Taiwan produces more than 90% of the world's most advanced semiconductors. The chips that are in your phone, your laptop, your car, your hospital equipment, your military systems, an overwhelming proportion of those chips come from Taiwan, and specifically from one company, TSMC. If Taiwan falls under Chinese military control, or even if a military conflict disrupts Taiwan's semiconductor production for months or years, the economic consequences for the United States would be catastrophic in a way that makes the COVID supply chain disruptions look like a minor inconvenience. That is the economic dimension of this story that does not get talked about nearly enough. American technology leadership, American economic competitiveness, American military capability, all of it runs through Taiwan's semiconductor industry. This is not a metaphor. This is a concrete, measurable, deeply documented dependency that successive American administrations have been scrambling to address through the CHIPS Act and domestic semiconductor investment, but which cannot be resolved overnight. The vulnerability is real, it is current, and it is part of what makes the Taiwan question so much more than a regional security issue. So when you hear that U.S. intelligence says China has no set date for a Taiwan move, the right reaction is not relief. The right reaction is to understand what that sentence actually means and to hold its full weight. It means the threat is real and growing. It means the preparation is ongoing and accelerating. It means the decision has not been made yet, but the capability to execute that decision is being built deliberately and systematically. It means the window for deterrence, for the kind of clear-eyed, well-resourced, diplomatically sophisticated deterrence that has prevented catastrophic wars before, is open right now, but it will not be open forever. And the choices that the United States makes in this moment about defense investment, about alliance commitments, about how seriously it takes the signals coming out of Beijing, will determine whether that window stays open or closes in a way that forces a far more terrible set of choices down the road. This is the story underneath the headline. This is what the intelligence assessment is really telling us. And this is why it matters to every single American watching the world right now and trying to make sense of where we are headed.